This video has been kindly sponsored by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for building your own brand and growing your business online. Previously, I made a guide on knitting a sweater as a beginner, and to continue on my goal to make a bunch of helpful guides for you all, I'll be teaching you how to knit a skirt and a pair of pants that are both completely customizable to your liking. I don't see many guides on YouTube for knitting bottoms, so hopefully this helps you. If you don't already know how to knit, I show the techniques in this tutorial, but I go more in depth in my knitting guide that's linked in the card to the right and in the description box below. Before you can start knitting your bottoms, you'll need a couple of tools. The first is yarn. For bottoms, I prefer to use a yarn that's a blend of wool and acrylic so that it has natural fibers but can also be thrown into the washing machine and isn't itchy. I also would recommend 100% cotton for bottoms to wear during warmer weather. For the skirt in this guide, I'm using Bernat's Lattice yarn, which is a polyester and acrylic blend. I'd rather not use that type of material, but I'm trying to use up the yarn I already own, and this one had a cute design on it the last time I made a skirt with it. For the pants, I'm using Big Twist acrylic yarn. Both of these yarns are a weight 4. The next tool you'll need are knitting needles. I recommend you choose your needles according to the label on your yarn. For both the skirt and the pants, I'm using 5mm needles. The last things you'll need are a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, measuring tape, and stitch markers. The stitch markers should be able to easily slip onto your needles, which will make it easier to work with. You'll also need an elastic band for your waist. To make it easier, I'd measure the elastic band around where you'd want your bottoms to sit on your waist, and then after cutting the band, sew the two ends together to join them in a circle. To knit bottoms, you're going to have to do some math, but don't worry, thankfully it's incredibly easy. First, you'll need to take some measurements. You'll need your waist or your hip measurements, or wherever you want the skirt or pants to sit while you have them on. If you don't know what number you should choose, measure one of your favorite pairs of pants or your favorite skirt flat, double that number, and then take that down as your desired measurement. So for an example, if your pants are 15 inches flat, then write down 30 inches for your desired measurement. After you have your measurements, you need to make a gauge swatch. A gauge swatch is a small swatch that's made with the yarn you want to use for your bottoms, as well as what stitch you're going to use. This swatch helps you figure out how many stitches you'll need to cast on to start your pants or skirt. For this swatch, I did a cast on of 20 stitches and worked up 20 rows with 5mm needles and weight 4 yarn. What you're going to do is measure the width of the swatch from one end to the other. Write this number down. For my swatch, it ended up being 5 inches wide. This means for every 20 stitches I do, I'll have 5 inches. You can also measure how many stitches are in 1 inch lengthwise. For my swatch, this was 7 stitches. So for every 7 stitches, I have 1 inch in length. Now it's time to make the calculations. Here is the formula you'll use to determine the number of stitches you'll need to cast on to start your bottoms. So you'll first plug in your numbers in the appropriate spots, the measurement of the swatch, which for mine was 5 inches, the number of stitches in the swatch, which for mine was 20 stitches, the measurement in inches, which is your desired circumference for your waist or hips. Mine was 26 inches that I preferred. The last number is for the cast on, which is what we're trying to find out. Now that all the numbers are in the formula, go ahead and multiply the number of stitches in the swatch by the desired measurement. For me, this was 20 times 26. The sum for me was 520. Now divide that number by the width of the swatch. My swatch was 5 inches wide, so I divided 420 by 5. My sum is 104, which is the amount of stitches I need to cast on for my skirt and my pants. Just because I wanted it to be a little bit loose, I added 4 extra stitches to that amount, but that's not necessary for you. So my actual cast on amount is 108 stitches. Now that you have all your tools and your measurements, it's officially time to start your bottoms. To note, this tutorial is done in English style since it's easier for beginners and I prefer it over continental. In this tutorial, I'm making 1 skirt and 1 pair of pants. For the skirt, there's only 3 sections. The first section is the waistband, the second section is the increased row, and the third section is the body of the skirt. For the pants, there are 6 sections. The first section is the waistband, the second section is the increased section, then we have the first pant leg section, and then the second pant leg section. The waistband sections for both the pants and the skirt are exactly the same, and then later on I split the tutorial to focus on the skirt and then the pants. It seems scary, but I promise it's incredibly easy if you take your time. To get started with both the skirt and the pants, first take your needles and your yarn and get ready to do a long tail cast on. To find out how much yarn you need to cast on, first take the yarn and wrap it around the needle 10 times. Then pick up the yarn from the 10th wrap, and that shows you that you have 10 stitches within that tail of yarn. To add more stitches, fold the yarn like so, and then you'll have 20 stitches. Fold it again and you'll have 30, and so on. You're going to do this until you reach where your cast on amount is. So since my cast on amount is 108, I folded the yarn until I got to 110, then pulled a bit extra out after. It's better to have extra yarn left over than not having enough. Once you have the amount you need, you're going to push the yarn together, which will form a loop. Then use your fingers to pull the left strand of yarn into the loop, then pull the right strand down to tighten the knot on the bottom. And now all you have to do is put your needle inside the loop and pull the ends to tighten. And now you're ready to cast on. To do the long tail cast on, all you have to do is take the yarn attached to your ball of yarn and place it in your left hand. The tail yarn that isn't connected to the ball is in your right hand. Wrap the connected yarn clockwise around your thumb and then take your needle and insert it from the bottom into the same little space as your thumb. With your right hand, take the tail yarn and wrap it around the needle counterclockwise. Then use your thumb to push the loop off your thumb and onto the needle. Pull the left strand of yarn until the loop is fitted onto the needle. And that is one stitch casted on. You're going to repeat this action over and over until you have the amount of cast on stitches you need on your needle. Once everything is casted on, it's time to start the waistband. For both the skirt and the pants, I joined in the round to start the waistband. To do this, first add one more cast on to your needles. Then make sure that all of the stitches are aligned and not twisted in a different direction. You're going to take the loop on the left needle and slide it onto the right needle. Then use your left needle to pull the second loop on the right needle over the first loop and then off the left needle entirely. You can pull your loose ends to tighten the gap you just made and then place the first loop from the right needle onto the left needle. This joins your project in the round. It's really important to add a stitch marker here so you can know where the row ends and begins. For the entire project, we're going to work it in stockinette stitch, but since we're working in the round, all you have to do is a knit stitch. To do a knit stitch, first take your working needle and insert it into the first stitch from the bottom to the top, then take the yarn connected to the ball of yarn and wrap it counterclockwise around the working needle. Then take the working needle and drag it down and under the stitch, then use it to drag the stitch off the holding needle. When the stitch is finally on the working needle, you can pull the yarn to tighten it a bit if it gets loose. Next, you're going to make another knit stitch in the next stitch since we need to repeat doing knit stitches for the entire project. So again, insert the working needle into the first stitch from the bottom to the top, making sure the needle makes sort of an X behind the holding needle. Then take the yarn connected to the ball of yarn and wrap it counterclockwise around the working needle. Then take the working needle and drag it down and under the stitch, then use it to drag the stitch off the holding needle. That's how you do a knit stitch. You're going to repeat this until the end of the row or until you reach your stitch marker stitch. When you do reach it, just slip it onto your right needle and continue knitting like normal. I repeated this for a total of 20 rows for my skirt and 15 rows for my pants, but you can make your waistband as long or short as you'd prefer. Mine was 3 inches or 7.6 centimeters for reference. To attach the elastic band, you're going to place it on the wrong side of the project and then fold the project in half so that the elastic is sitting on the inside of the project. Align the beginning of the row with the tail from the beginning of the cast on row. Then what you're going to do is insert your needle into the first stitch as if you're going to knit. Then use that same needle and insert it into the first stitch of the cast on row. Once both loops are on the needle like so, you're going to knit normally. It might be a bit difficult to do, but after this and the next row, the rest of the project will be a breeze. So again, insert your needle into the next stitch as if you're going to knit. Then find the next stitch on the cast on row and insert that same needle into that stitch as well. Then knit them both at the same time. You're going to do this until you reach the stitch marker. Once you get to the end of the row, just as a precaution in case you mess up anything, it's best to take our tapestry needle and a long piece of yarn in a different color and slip the yarn into each of the stitches as a lifeline. So if you mess up and ever have to take your stitches off, or if you want to try on your project, the stitches won't drop and you can easily slip your needles back in and continue working on your project. Now this is where we differentiate from the skirt and the pants. I'm going to start with the skirt, so if you're wanting to make the pants, you can use the timestamps to skip over to that tutorial. For the skirt, we're going to create one row of increases. So for the first stitch, you're going to knit it normally. For the second stitch, insert your needle as if to knit. Then knit the stitch normally, but don't let the loop fall off of the holding needle. Instead, you're going to turn to the back of the stitch and insert your working needle into the back loop of the stitch on the holding needle like so. Then go ahead and knit normally. This creates another stitch, which is called an increase. You're going to do this in every other stitch. So again, knit the next stitch normally. Then the second stitch, you're going to knit normally, but don't let the loop fall off the needle. Turn your project a bit and insert your working needle from top to bottom in the back loop and then knit normally. Doing this adds half of your cast on amount to the body of the skirt. So since I casted on 108 stitches, I increased the stitches count up to 162 by adding 54 more stitches so that it can fit over my hips. If you need to, you can add another row of increases if it still doesn't fit, but I think one row of increases should be good. After the first row of increases, all you're going to do for the rest of the skirt is knit normally. That's all you're going to do, which makes this project incredibly easy. I worked on my skirt for a total of 230 rows. Whenever you want to try on the skirt just to make sure the fit is right or to see how long you have left to knit, just take your tapestry needle and some different yarn and go through all of the stitches while taking your needles off so you can properly try the skirt on. This is where I first tried on the skirt to see the length, and it was coming out so beautifully. Then when you're ready to start working again, just insert your needles in the direction you tend to knit until all of the stitches are back on the needles. Then pull out the extra yarn and you can start working again. Once you reach your desired length for the skirt, which for me was 36 inches long, you can cast off. For the skirt and the pants, I don't add any type of ribbing for my personal projects, but you can if you want to. Just refer to my knitting guide on how to do the rib stitch. For this skirt, all I did was a regular cast off. To do this, first knit the first 2 stitches. Then take your holding needle and pull the second loop over the first loop and off the working needle. And that's your first cast off. You're going to repeat this action all around until you have 1 loop remaining. Once you have 1 loop remaining, you're going to take the yarn and create an additional stitch by casting on 1 stitch to your needle. Then pull the second loop over the first loop. Pull a bit of a tail, then cut off and pull to secure. Take your tapestry needle and weave in the tail to the inside of the skirt by going through the loops diagonally. And then repeat that but downward after. Then cut off the excess yarn and your skirt is complete. You can make it as long or as short as you want. You can do an array of different colors and fun patterns, and if you know how to duplicate stitch, you can even add really cute designs to your skirt as well. It all depends on what you want to wear. To start the body of the pants, you have to first work one row of knit stitches normally. For these pants, I wanted to create something similar to these pants in this image, so I'm going to be making striped pants. To start, I first attached my white color by inserting my needle as if to knit. I looped my white yarn onto the needle with the tail end facing the inside of the project, and then finished the knit stitch with that new yarn. Then I continued to knit normally until the halfway point of the row, which for me is the 54th stitch. So I knitted until I finished the 54th stitch, which should align with the first stitch of the row. I added a stitch marker right after it and then continued knitting until the end of the row. For the second row of the body, we're going to start the increase rows. Before we do though, we need to do a bit more separating. The start of the row and the area marked earlier are both going to be the sides of the pants. So we need to mark where the front and the back of the pants are going to be. To do this, you're going to count to the half point of each side of the half points. So half of my cast on amount is 54 and half of that is 27. So I counted up until the 27th stitch and then added a stitch marker after that stitch. With those stitches marked, you can see that those are going to be the front and the back of the pants, and then where the row starts is going to be the side of the pants, just to make it easier to do the increases and change colors without any issues. To do the increases, you're first going to knit normally until you reach one stitch before the stitch marker. Once you reach the stitch before the stitch marker, you're going to make one right. To do this, take your left needle and pull the loop in between the two stitches from the back. Then use your right needle and insert it into the front loop of the stitch on the left needle from bottom to top. Then knit normally. That is a make one right increase. This makes an increase that leans to the right, hence the name. After, you're going to knit the next stitch normally. Slide your stitch marker to the opposite needle, knit the next stitch normally, then make one left. To make one left, take your left needle and pull up the loop in between the two stitches from the front. Then take your right needle and insert it into the back loop of the stitch on the left needle from bottom to top and knit normally. That is a make one left, which creates an increase that leans to the left. After, you're going to knit normally until you reach the stitch before the next stitch marker. Once you reach the stitch before the stitch marker, you're going to again make one right. Again, to do this, take your needle and pull up the middle loop from the back. Then take your right needle and insert it into the front loop of the stitch on your left needle from bottom to top and knit normally. Knit the next stitch normally, slide your stitch marker over, knit the next stitch normally, then make one left by using your left needle to pull up the middle loop from the front, then use your right needle to insert into the back loop of the stitch on the left needle and knit normally. Then knit the rest of the row normally. Once you reach the beginning of row stitch marker, you're going to work the next row normally with no increases. Doing this helps relax the stitches near the increased stitches so that everything is neat. Just as a reference, and not because I forgot to alternate between rows or anything, this is what it would look like if you were to increase into every row. The increase sections become really large and there's a lot of extra fabric just sitting there and it doesn't look good to me. So instead, you're basically just going to do every odd row with normal knit rows and every even row with increases. For the fourth row of the body, normally, you're going to again work on your increases. So knit normally until the stitch before the stitch marker. Then do your make one right increase. A little tip at remembering which one is which is after pulling up your loop with your left needle, you can see that for the make one right increase, the long side of the stitch is in the back and the short side that you work into is in the front. So you can remember to work into the front. After, knit the next 2 stitches normally. For the make one left, you can remember it by after pulling up your loop with your left needle, the long side of the stitch is in the front and the short side you have to work into is in the back. Hopefully that little tip helps. You're going to alternate between 1 increase row and 1 knit row until the body is the size you desire. To figure that out, just try on the pants after maybe 6 or 7 inches. To try them on, just take your tapestry needle and some different yarn and go through all of the stitches while taking your needles off so you can see how the pants are actually coming along, since when they're scrunched up on the needles, it's hard to tell. Here you can see how the increases are coming along and also measure how the length is and how much your body needs or where you want the legs to begin separating. That's all on you, since only you will know what you prefer, so this makes it incredibly customizable for your own specific body. When you're ready to start working again, just insert your needles into the direction you tend to knit in until all of the stitches are back on the needles. Then pull out the extra yarn and you can start working again. For my pants, I worked in alternating increase rows until I reached 8 inches in length, which doesn't include the waistband. Once you've reached your desired length for the top half of the pants and you're ready to separate for the legs, first go ahead and attach your next color if you're working stripes. Then knit normally until the first stitch marker. Once you reach it, slide it onto your needles just in case you mess up and need to go back later. This here indicates the halfway point, or rather 1/2 of one pant leg. The second stitch marker is where the other half of the pant leg starts. So we have to connect to the other side, then work down until the beginning of row stitch marker. Before we do that though, we have to take the other pant leg off of the needles since we can only work on one at a time. So take your tapestry needle and a long piece of scrap yarn and start removing the stitches from the needles and onto the scrap yarn. I include the stitch marker as well just in case. Then I tied the scrap yarn so that the stitches won't fall off at all while I work on the first pant leg. To attach the first pant leg together, I casted on 5 stitches onto my needle. The amount of stitches you cast on is something you can experiment with. You can cast on 1 stitch, you can cast on 3 or 5 or 7. It just depends on how loose or tight you want the crotch to be. What I suggest is picking a number, adding a piece of scrap yarn to that row, then working a couple of rows and try it on to see if it fits comfortably. That way, whenever you make pants again in the future, you automatically know what number you need to choose. For mine, I casted on 5 stitches. The number is uneven because the last stitch is going to be used to join it in the round. To cast on, loop the yarn around your thumb clockwise, place your working needle into the little loop gap from bottom to top where your thumb is, slide the loop onto your needle and pull the yarn to tighten. I did this 4 more times. Then to join it in the round, I slid the loop on the holding needle onto the working needle, then took the second loop on the working needle and pulled it up over the first loop and off the needle. Then I placed the first stitch back onto the holding needle and everything is attached. Once it was, I just began knitting normally. There's a little bit of a gap here, but that gap will disappear once we attach the second leg later on. Once you reach the beginning of the row, you're just going to continue knitting normally. There's no more increases to do or separating or anything. Just knit stitches until you reach your desired length. Once you reach the part where you casted on extra stitches earlier, you're just going to knit those normally, but make sure you hold the stitches close and knit them tightly so that there won't be any laddering or stitches that just don't look right. It'll be a bit tight for this first row, but that's perfectly normal. After, just continue knitting like normal. I decided to try on my pants to see how the crotch cast-ons fit after doing a couple rows, and it fit perfectly. For the pant legs, I did a total of 170 rows. Once I reached my desired length, which was 37 inches for the entire pants and 28 inches for each individual leg, I cast it off normally. To do this, first knit the first 2 stitches. Then take your left needle and pull the second loop over the first loop and off the right needle. And that's your first cast off. You're going to repeat this action all around until you have 1 loop remaining. Once you have 1 loop remaining, you're going to take the yarn and create an additional stitch by casting on 1 stitch to your needle. Then pull the second loop over the first loop. Pull a bit of a tail. Then cut off and pull to secure. And you just finished your first pant leg. To start the second pant leg, first choose a random spot to make the beginning of the row. I personally chose the side of the pant leg so that it's even with the first pant leg we just finished. In that stitch, I just began attaching my needles and continued all around. When I got to that little gap where the crotch is, I just ignored it for now and went ahead and attached my needles into the next available stitch. Once my needles were attached, I added a stitch marker to remember where the beginning of the row was and then attached my black yarn since that's how I started the first pant leg. Then I knitted down normally with the black until that middle crotch gap. Once the gap section arrived, I looked at where I did the extra cast-ons on the first pant leg. Since I casted on 5, there were 5 loops that were there that I needed to work in. I took my working needle and inserted it into the first stitch from the front to the back, then knitted into it normally. I repeated this for the other 4 loops. After I knitted into the 5 loops, I went ahead and joined it in the round by knitting the next stitch, then taking my left needle to pull the second loop on my working needle off the needle, which casts off that 5th stitch. Then after that, I just knitted the pant leg the same exact way as the first one for 170 rows. Once your pant legs are complete, all you have to do is weave in your ends. To do this, first take your pants and turn them inside out. Then use your tapestry needle and the tail you want to weave in and insert your yarn into the next stitch but diagonally. Repeat working into the stitches diagonally like so. Then repeat this in the opposite direction. After, cut off the excess yarn and your pants are complete. Just for reference, I did 15 rows for my waistband before adding my elastic and knitting it into itself. Then I did 49 rows of alternate increase rows, then 170 rows for each pant leg. After all that, this was the final result. These pants fit perfectly on me and I'm honestly excited to make a whole bunch more. I can even make shorts if I want. I can add cute duplicate stitch designs onto them. The possibilities are endless. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments down below and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Before we go, I want to quickly say thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're creating a website to offer services, sell products, or to just showcase your art portfolio, Squarespace makes it easy to create a beautiful website and engage with your audience. Squarespace has an incredibly easy website builder, which will help you get started whether you're someone who prefers to use a professionally designed template, or if you want to go deeper into the designing process, Squarespace has the tools to help you build a site just how you'd like it. If you're someone who's wanting to sell products, whether they're physical, digital, or even memberships, Squarespace has all the tools you need to get started, like their commerce tool, which allows you to track orders you've received and even offers ways to develop your shop even further. You can even engage with your audience by sending out newsletters with their email campaigns, which are completely customizable and come with analytics for you to keep track of engagement and help improve your marketing strategies. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/ikoxun to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video.